3 life-changing ideas from Robert Greene. Now, who is Robert Greene? Robert Greene is a well-known American author, and his educational background was in classical studies. This is an interesting degree that examines literature, art, civilizations, and ancient societies. Now, his book, 48 Laws of Power, was definitely a breakthrough, no doubt about it. And this book spoke about manipulation and influence, and it gained a following amongst politicians and business leaders. Of course, Robert Greene has other books, and these other books include Mastery, the 50th Law, Daily Laws, the Laws of Human Nature, etc. Now, Robert Greene often makes reference to the darker elements of human psychology, and he embraces the notion of a cruel world. He may not use those specific terms, but the sentiment is very, very clear in his work. Now, Robert Greene also did a Google presentation on his book Mastery, and he also did a TED talk about the key to transform yourself. Now, Mastery is another key message from Robert Greene. So as we can see, Robert Greene has great credibility, he has great visibility, and this video will explore some of his ideas that could potentially be life-changing. So let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Idea 1, win through actions, never argument. Now, Robert Greene addresses this idea in his book, 48 Laws of Power. So let me tell you a story. So there was this guy, let's call him Jack, and he was reserved, but he was also an artist. Now, being a reserved introvert, he did not speak much because that was natural to him. But instead of talking, Jack would work on his craft, making these stunning, absolutely stunning murals. These were real eye-catching pieces of art. And he never really spoke about his artwork. He always wanted the art to do the talking, figuratively speaking. He just felt a compulsion to do this. It was his purpose, it was his passion. And he would use social media to reveal his incredible work. And these visual experiences, they gained followers and they gained traction. And the more murals he produced, the more his art spoke to his people. As his digital resume grew, so did his commissions, and he made considerable amounts of money. But he never spoke through words. He always spoke through the experience of his murals. His incredible art was his form of communication. And we can learn from this story. We can really learn from this story the importance of speaking through actions. Now, a businessman can talk to you and they can tell you that he or she generates millions in revenue. But if we go to company's house and look at their financial records, that will tell us the real story. And some of us tell stories that are not true to make us look bigger than what we are. Some would say that politicians embody this because they say the perfect words, they're linguistically brilliant, but the actions, they don't match their verbal dexterity. Matter of fact, the politician will always win through arguments, but in the battle of actions, they rarely, if ever, show up. So who would you prefer to be? The politician that only speaks through words, or the artist who only speaks through their actions? Robert Greene understands the power of speaking through actions, which is referenced in his book, 48 Laws of Power. But the real question is, do you understand the power of speaking through actions? So idea number 2, self-reliance. Now, Robert Greene talks a lot. He talks a lot about self-reliance, and this is inspired by the American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, the concept of his self-reliance was partly due to non-conformity and to trust yourself. So that's 2 elements, non-conformity and to trust yourself. Obviously, there was other elements as well. But in a traditional sense, self-reliance is, quote, a reliance on one's own powers and resources rather than those of others, end of quote. So let's break this down and let's describe this concept in a short story. So there was this woman, let's call her Ava. Now, Ava was a musician. She was a really good musician, but she struggled to get her songs heard. Unfortunately, this is a common theme in the music industry. Why is that? It's because it's a ruthless, yes, ruthless industry. And yes, it's packaged with smiley faces, but that's not the reality, I assure you. Now let's get back to Ava. So Ava had a self-reliant mind, and because of this, she started her own music publishing company. She learned about the monetary and legal elements of the music industry. So she built her following, she had her own newsletter, and she brought in artists to develop her company. So through persistence, self-reliance, mastery, she built a thriving, yes, a thriving business. Now, she saw a gap in the market where she could benefit artists, but also create her own self-reliance. She created a success that was independent of the music industry, independent of the ruthless music industry, and her publishing company was the product of that, because not only did she own the company, she gave a great service to her artists. Now, self-reliance is important, but of course, we must remember that we rely on things. We rely on our hearts to beat, for our brains to function effectively. We rely on oxygen to breathe, and we may rely on our partners to build on our weaknesses and to develop our strengths. And Robert Greene understands self-reliance because in one sense, the entrepreneur aims to be self-reliant, because instead of a company providing you a job, you're trying to build resources to create your own job. And this is effectively what Robert Greene did. Interestingly, Robert Greene stated the following, quote, "I'm a big believer in being an entrepreneur. It's easy for me to say that because I work for myself and I am someone who likes that process. You have control over your own destiny." End of quote. And if I'm honest, self-reliance is extremely difficult, but also extremely rewarding if successful. In the self-improvement genre or context, self-reliance is essential because we are relying on the ability of our minds to find solutions and evolve in a positive way. Robert Greene sees the power of self-reliance as it avoids the pitfalls of dependency. And dependency, of course, can be a bad thing. But one should know that this is a hard path. It's a hard path. But if you succeed, the treasure is not only material, it's also psychological. Idea 3, reality and adaptability. There are two important ideas here that Robert Greene is articulating. The first is the concept of cold realism. The second concept is adaptability. Now, when we talk about cold realism, we are effectively talking about the harsh reality of life, the harsh reality of life. And this, let's be honest, is the elephant in the room. In a figuratively way, we don't always see evil, but that does not mean that evil does not exist. Let's give a quick analogy. We don't physically see the atoms. We don't, but we know that the atoms exist. Now, the second part, adaptability or effective adaptability, this is so important, and we can describe this in the context of human survival. Matter of fact, humans have survived because of adaptability, and part of that adaptability would have been advanced cognitive abilities over other animals, which is effectively the ability to solve complex problems and assess information. Additional to this, Homo sapiens had tool making, which was a total innovation. Think of this, what other animals create tools to attack prey? And the crafting of tools from wood or stone allowed them not just to hunt prey, but to clear paths, create traps for animals, and build shelters. They also had the invention of social structures, and this is sharing information, sharing resources, and dividing labor. All of this requires adaptability. And here's a question. If Homo sapiens never adapted, would we be here today? That is a great question, and some may argue it's an obvious question, but let's tell another story to emphasize the point of adaptability. And let's call this person Sophia. So Sophia, she was an entrepreneur that sold cakes. She had a traditional recipe, but the high sugar content was not attracting enough customers. So after some deliberation and some market research, Sophia realized today's customer was more health conscious. So what did she do? Sophia adapted her recipe, changing the sugar for honey, and created gluten-friendly and vegan options. This took time and it took effort, but eventually Sophia had adapted her cakes accordingly, and by doing this, she accommodated the new customers. With these new options, good marketing, and a great product, Sophia was able to attract the new health-conscious customer. Just like the Homo sapiens in the jungle, Sophia effectively adapted, and her effective adaptation gave her a thriving business. And the important point here is that her adaptation was essential for Sophia to have that thriving business. And Robert Greene, of course, advocates this adaptability, and it is an essential lesson. Now, in the business context, you may have to adapt your product or adapt your service. Maybe, just maybe, you need to adapt your marketing strategy, or maybe you need to change your business or understand your customers more. There are so many variables. And when we look at the digital economy, it's a reminder that nothing stays the same. Robert Greene knows about adaptability, but the real question is, do you understand adaptability? And more importantly, do you know how to implement it effectively?